What's up, everybody? Welcome to LettermenRow.com. I am Jeremy Birmingham. That is Spencer Holbrook. This is Talking Stuff, the Ohio State recruiting podcast brought to you by Buyers Automotive. Spencer and I are looking at the end of the dead period. It's finally arriving in short order at the end of May. And with that news, Spencer, we got our first glimpse of kids getting back into the horseshoe this past weekend for the Ohio State spring game. It wasn't like Florida State or Alabama or one of these places that has a giant rush of kids, but it was still important for Ohio State to get a handful of players from the 2021 class who hadn't been able to visit, the 2022 class who have been waiting to visit, and the 2023 class, including 3 of the 4 in-state offers, Josh Padilla, Luke Montgomery, and Sonny Styles, all the opportunity to spend a day together in Ohio Stadium, getting to, just really kind of hang out. And when you're talking about 15-year-old, 16-year-old kids, just getting to know each other in that personal level away from the Zooms and FaceTimes is so important.
Yeah, and this is kind of like, I don't know, I really want to say a new normal because we expect to have more people in the horseshoe. We expect to have visitors on campus here in the next couple months. But, the opportunity to be on campus and to see the horseshoe, even though it's not rocking as, if Michigan or Penn State was in the building and it's only 20,000 fans, but it's still an opportunity just to see. There are some fans. There's football being played on the turf. There's coaches on the sidelines. They couldn't talk to them, but it just felt a little more normal. I was pretty happy for those guys just to be able to get together for maybe the first time. I don't know if they've gotten to know eeach other through Zoom or through Twitter or whatever they talk through. Nowadays we're kind of old, so we don't really know. But yeah, it was just nice to see. There's a lot of kids in the stands and there were more recruits there than I thought there would be because I thought there were going to be none. So we can touch on that.
And it's actually a good thing. Luke Montgomery and Sonny Styles, for example, those two have talked about really making a number of trips together in June around the country. And those are kids that are interested in Ohio State, Notre Dame, the same types of schools. And they're going to have a real pull, a real attachment to one another by the time this is all said and done. And it's what we've talked about over and over is that Ohio-based kids have an opportunity to really start the class. And that's why Ryan Day and the Buckeyes offer them so early. It's because they want those guys to serve as the foundation. So for Luke Montgomery, for Josh Padilla, for Sonny Styles, to Brennan Vernon to a degree, who did not visit this weekend. He had thought about it, but then had some family stuff come up. These opportunities to sit and just talk and get to know each other and make sure that their personalities mesh are really important. And Montgomery, and I've written about it on the website, is one of these kids that is sort of a Pied Piper, CJ Hicks type of Captain Buckeye potentially down the road, where that if this kid's involved, he's going to be trying to get people to work with him. And it's funny because most of those connections he's made are through basketball. That's how Luke got to know Sonny Styles and Peyton Kirkland, who was on Berminology this week. Peyton Kirkland is a kid who Luke Montgomery met on the AAU circuit in basketball when Peyton Kirkland lived in Chicago. Like, it's just weird things that you just don't know how. It seems like he knows everyone. And so there's a real chance for him to kickstart that class if Luke decides he wants to be the first one to commit. But we talk about like the importance of these kids getting to know each other and be around each other. Jordan Hancock, who made his first visit to Ohio State since committing to the school with his family, he wasn't allowed to talk to the coaches during his visit, but he was able to meet up with Jalen Johnson. And Jalen Johnson is sort of the reason that Jordan Hancock flipped from Clemson. So it's just those bonds are important to be able to cement.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. Getting these guys together to be able to start to build that class and say, hey, this could be us in a couple of years, at Ohio State, with Luke Montgomery, with Sonny Styles, those are two guys that we're starting to get the feel Ohio State must land in the 2023 class. They would be, great first pieces for a recruiting class, especially Montgomery, because like you said, he's such a outspoken guy. He would be a great recruiter, a great foundational piece. It's just interesting that the spring game when, Ohio State wasn't passing out tickets to recruits by any means. It's just kind of interesting how they all found a way to get there and to be able to make those connections and to be able to talk to each other. And then for Jordan Hancock, I still kind of feel bad for him because, he's already signed. He's already signed. He's sitting in on meetings. He's doing everything he can as basically an early enrollee, from 1,000 miles away, and still can't talk to coaches. That it just doesn't make any sense. But that might be a time for another show or for later in this show or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to hear the rationale behind the NCAA's decision to not allow signed prospects to talk to coaches when they're on visits, when they are able to have workout plans and they're able to have playbooks and they're able to sit in on meetings via Zoom or like what. I don't understand that at all, but none of those things really matter. And the NCAA does not care one lick about what I think. So, we're talking about the weekends and the importance of these kids getting back into campus. And we've talked a little bit about the June 4th weekend already, which is now shaping up to be the biggest one for the class of 2022 for Ohio State. That right now all 11 commits are expected to be in attendance with their official visits. And, what's going to be fascinating to watch is whether or not Ohio State and the commits, knowing that Keontae Goodwin is now committed to Kentucky, as we have been talking about the last few weeks, that was going to happen. Now that he is committed to Kentucky, but been telling everyone he's still going to take official visits, is that a weekend that you can get someone like Keontae Goodwin to make a visit when you have all 11 of your commits there? Because, I know that Keontae Goodwin had a good relationship with Kentucky, but I can't help but wonder if maybe there was an opportunity somewhere for Ohio State to be like, hey, we told you the dead period was going to end. Everyone else told you the dead period was going to end. And then, you were told by one or two schools that it wasn't. Maybe there's a reason they didn't want you to think it was going to end. But now you have all 11 of your commitments coming into town, and it's a pretty short trip from Louisville up to Columbus. And you wonder if the Buckeyes can make that weekend that much bigger by getting players like Keontae Goodwin into town.
Yeah, and when you have guys like, Tegra and CJ Hicks and the foundational piece of the recruiting class, and you add in Caleb Burton and Quinn Ewers, that's kind of a tantalizing group to be around if you're a guy like Keontae Goodwin, where, you're going to see all these 5-stars and these guys that have potential winning a national championship. And then, you might go somewhere else to another school on your next official visit and you see the guys that you might be playing with, and then you have to kind of maybe sit back and really think about where you want to play or what you want to do. I just think that that's kind of an interesting, bargaining chip for Ohio State, where if you get him on campus with some of those commits that are already locked into the class, and you say, this is who you could play with, that is really hard to turn down. And I just think that Ohio State would be wise to really push for that opening weekend of June to get him on campus.
Yeah, and it's not just the commits. You also have the top target at defensive end and Amari Abor visiting that weekend. You have Xavier Wampa and Zion Branch both visiting that weekend. You have a class full of top targets visiting Emil Wagner, Dominic James, Toriana Pride. You got like your top players at every position that are coming in at that time. And for a class that is sort of, I don't want to say stuck in neutral right now, but obviously not a lot has happened, but that's sort of by design. Ohio State really wanted to make sure they didn't overreact to this dead period in the months of April and May. That is sort of that weekend where you're like, oh boy, we got to really go. We got to go right now. And so not only are you have the 11 commits coming in town, but you have, again, your top target on the defensive line, your top target at cornerback, a couple of your top targets on the offensive line. And so you just really hope that the Buckeyes are also still hoping that Caden Curry can visit that weekend. And if he's not playing baseball that weekend, I can almost assure you he will be making his official then as well. So like it has the makings of a class defining weekend for Ohio State. And I don't think that it has the same feel to it if Keontae Goodwin isn't there.
I think one thing that we should mention before we go any further with this discussion is that weekend may not result in instant commitments. Just because, guys, it'll be new, that the dead period will be over. Guys will probably want to take a couple visits after that, but that weekend could define whether Ohio State can land some of these top targets. And I think that's a huge step for the program to get back into the swing of recruiting in person and make it a big splash right away. Say, hey, we're going all in right away. We really need to pick up the pace in this 2022 class. I think the class has a chance to do that. But like you said, if Keontae Goodwin isn't there, the weekend won't feel hollow, but at the same time, it might feel a little hollow just because he's the guy at offensive tackle.
Yeah, and right now, I mean, it means nothing, but the Ohio State class has fallen behind and is now number 2 in the country behind Georgia, who has 12 commitments. Ohio State has 11. Ohio State has 4 5-stars in the class of 2022. Georgia has 2, but Georgia has picked up the pace a little bit, and they have a very slim lead over the Buckeyes as the country's top-ranked class according to the 247 Sports rankings. That weekend, when you have Xavier Wampa, when you have Zion Branch, when you have Amario Abor, when you have all these guys coming to town, you have an opportunity to really make a huge, huge splash. And that is a weekend that Spencer and I will be talking about a lot over the next 4 or 5 weeks until it happens. So I don't want to beat the bush around too much about that right now because it is still 5 weeks away. And we have a couple of things we want to get to from Twitter and whatever. But, the other thing that people keep asking about, there's 2 things. So let's just dive right into those, Spencer. The two names people want to ask about every time we ask for recruiting questions of the day or questions for talking stuff are Henry To'o and JT Tuimoloau. Nothing has changed on either one of those fronts. And I wish that there was something to tell you folks, but there's just not. One thing that you can, I guess, look for now is that the spring practices are over at Ohio State. And maybe that accelerates the timeline for To'o. There is still conversation about Alabama with him. I don't personally believe it's an Ohio State-Alabama battle right now. I could be completely wrong. I have been wrong before. It's not like I'm infallible, but the people I talk to at Ohio State seem to still be very confident that they think that, he's feeling good about the relationship he has with the Buckeyes. When exactly we're looking at a timeline for that, it could be anytime. I would expect something probably in May. However, I don't think he's going to wait till June. Who is waiting until June?
JT Tuimoloau. Wow. I think there's an extra owl in there, Berm. I heard it a couple times from some people who, are out there and in the know, and I heard an extra owl on there, and now my entire world has been flipped upside down.
Whatever, JTT is going to make his official visits in June. And when exactly that happens, we don't know. His athletic seasons are all in flux. The likelihood is, and this is just trying to put the pieces together, he's going to take multiple official visits all in a row and then go home, make a decision, and then be on campus somewhere the next week. Like, that's pretty much the way it's going to have to go for him to be on a college campus by the end of June when all these 2021 kids need to be there. So not much is going to happen. I don't know, Spencer, if it matters like when Ohio State gets the visit. I don't know if it matters if they're first or last or any of those things, because right now this relationship and this recruitment has just been such a slow burn that I don't think it's going to make a difference no matter which places he visits. When he visits them, he's going to obviously step back and lay out the cards on the table and make a very cautious, very informed, and very slow decision.
But we do know, Berm, the one thing that we do know in this entire recruitment is that the Ohio State visit is the key to everything. I think if he would have visited Ohio State at some point in this recruitment, he might have made a decision one way or another, But if he would have already been to Ohio State, this thing could already be wrapped up.
Yeah, I think a lot of people believe that. Yeah, I agree.
That visit to Ohio State is the key. And as soon as he makes that visit to Ohio State, you have to start to wonder, okay, if it was a good visit, a positive visit, maybe there's a commitment coming. If it was, an average visit or whatever term you want to use, maybe he has some thinking to do. But from all accounts that we've heard so far throughout this entire saga, I guess is what you could call it now, the key to everything was he wanted to get to Ohio State. His family wanted to get to Ohio State. That seems like it's going to be able to happen in June. And that's a big step forward because we just haven't had that in the last year plus of even chatter about when that could happen.
Yeah, and it's not about, it is going to happen in June. If it happens anywhere, it's going to be in June. The dead period is ending May 31st. There's going to be 1 month of open recruiting, and then they're going to go right back to a dead period in July. So, you're going to just see an absolute mad dash of kids around the country, but none of them are going to be as interesting to watch as JT Tuimoloau. I don't know. That guy in the comments will tell us, and I appreciate you every single time, sir, but it's just something in my head that prevents me from remembering the phonetic breakdown.
Tuimoloau. You say the
Wow.
O and then ow. So it's Tuimoloau.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. I mean, I'll let you just say it from now on. We'll
Okay.
just do that. I'll be like, Spencer, who are we talking about today? And you'll be like, it's this guy. And then I'll just go, that's correct. So that's going to be the way we handle it from now on, folks. Spencer, let's just dive now into a couple questions we got on the Twitter today. And I think it's important that we always engage with the fans and make sure that people know that we are reading your stuff and your questions and your thoughts. As per usual, I'm not going to know what question Spencer is asking me to respond to. So go. Okay, go.
So I have this one that's actually kind of, it's kind of up to date, even though it happened before the spring game. But I think the spring game shed some light on this because now we've got questions about quarterbacks. And so It does trickle into recruiting. So Zachary Pop asked, do you have any concerns about quarterback recruiting, long-term quarterback depth issues? It's tough to ask a 5-star quarterback to sit for 2 years or lose a starting spot as a junior, which could happen to McCord in theory with CJ Stroud or Jack Miller and then Quinn Ewers. Do you have any concerns about the long-term depth of the quarterback room when it comes to recruiting? I do.
Yeah, sure. You have to. And I don't think that it's an Ohio State problem. I think that's a college football problem. And I don't think that's going to change. I think if you look back into the early 2000s, where like USC had the run of Carson Palmer, Matt Leinart, they had that backup who never played there, Matt Castle or whatever, who got drafted. Like those things are just not going to happen anymore. These kids, you're not going to have 4 or 5 deep in the quarterback room the way that schools used to for very long. And that's to say Ohio State is doing anything wrong. The goal should be get the best player at the position every single year and then let it sort out from there. But I think if you have 2 guys that are really good players at that position right now, you're in a much better spot than almost every other school in the country because everyone else is fighting to hold on to 1. So, it's a good spot to start from if you're Ohio State, but clearly there are decisions that are going to be made by these 3 quarterbacks that are currently on the roster and figure out what's the best situation for them. College football with the free transfer now happening and being allowed to transfer one time penalty free and without having to sit out, there's going to be a lot of decisions that kids make on a whim. There's going to be a lot of times when schools probably tamper in a way that people are just going to have to get used to. And it's easy for those quarterbacks to go to Ohio State for a year, 2 years, learn from Ryan Day, figure out things a little bit, and then go be a starter somewhere else. I mean, LSU won a national championship because Joe Burrow did that. And I don't think that that's lost on anyone. But again, I think that Ryan Day's stated goal has been to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster every year at Ohio State. And anymore, I just don't think that's even possible. I really don't. I mean, you have the 3 right now. You have Quinn Ewers coming in December, but we're all crazy, I think, to even assume that all of those guys are going to be on the roster come next spring.
Yeah, those 4 will not be in the same quarterback room. I will be stunned if all 4 of those guys were in the same quarterback room at once. I mean, that's not to say, I'm not going to pick who's transferring. We're not in the business of trying to dissect who's going to transfer and who's not. We will never do that on this show or on Lettermen Row at all. But, it's just not possible for all 4 of those guys to be in the same quarterback room. You don't have that anymore in college football. And that's not a knock on any of these guys. There are 130 FBS schools and all of them need a quarterback and all of them, there are probably 125 of them that would like to have the backup at Ohio State. So, I mean,
there's probably 100 of them that would like to have whoever ends up being third on the. I mean, this is Ohio State's 3rd string quarterback, whoever that ends up being at the start of this upcoming season, could probably start at 100 schools in the country. And so it is certainly a concern long term. But as long as Ohio State keeps recruiting the best player it can recruit at that position every year, then from there you just let the chips fall where they may, and you can't really worry too much about how to manage the roster or how to manage egos in order to prevent, or mitigate the adjusting or the attrition, because it's going to happen. So you just need to keep recruiting the best players you can get. Let these kids know, hey, the reason that you're here is because we can develop you the best, even if it is for 2 years, even if it's for 3 or 4, then move on if that's what you have to do. But the goal is find the best players, let them compete, and then let the chips fall where they may. And so anything else beyond that right now is, I think, just kind of a fool's errand, because you simply are not going to have 4 deep quarterback rooms around the country anymore. You're just not. Look at Michigan. I mean, I look at what happened to Michigan in the last year. Cade McNamara comes in and plays essentially 1.5 games, and Joe Milton and Dylan McCaffrey are gone. And I don't want to compare the quality of the program at Michigan to Ohio State right now, but that is what happens everywhere. There's too many opportunities out there for kids. Too many coaches that are new in their jobs that are looking for new players. And it's just the Kansas State, I think I saw it on Monday night. The coach of Kansas State said moving forward, he's going to only be signing 15 high school players a year because he wants to save room for 10 transfer portal guys every year. The game of college football is changing in a way that people are going to have a tough time with over the next handful of years. And it's best exemplified at the quarterback position, because it is so obvious that there's only one guy who can play.
Yeah, I think we covered that pretty well. Thanks, Zachary, for the question. Then Travis asks, how many receivers will Ohio State take in the upcoming class, considering, and this is something I didn't even really consider, considering Mookie Cooper transferred and G. Scott is going to tight end? How many wide receivers? Could Ohio State take a couple? I mean, before you start, Berm, I'll preface this with, they're going to lose Jalen Harris, Elijah Gardner. They're going to lose Chris Olave. They're going to lose Garrett Wilson. If Jamison Williams somehow has a breakout season in that crowded wide receiver room, you could see him make a dash to the NFL. There could be a lot of turnover on the roster at the wide receiver position after this year, and it could still be a loaded room, but there could be some turnover.
Well, Jamison Williams is a senior, isn't he? No, he's a junior, right? So he came in 2019. So, you're losing a handful of guys, obviously, but there's a lot of guys there that can still play. You don't know what's going to happen with Cameron Babb. We don't know what exactly the plan is, as you mentioned, with Jamison Williams. Even with G. Scott moving to tight end, like, there's still plenty of dudes there. With Caleb Burton and Keon Grace committed, the goal right now, and this is obviously can change at any moment, the goal right now is for Ohio State to sign 3 receivers in the class of 2022, but maybe there's more attrition coming than people are expecting, and so then that changes things. But right now, the targets remain C.J. Williams, Kojo Antwi, and Caleb Brown out of Chicago. Those are the main 3, and then there's still conversation with Caden Saunders, the Penn State commit, who I really like and I think is a player that is very interesting. But I have the same question about Caleb Brown that I do Caden Saunders, and it's how does that smaller receiver right now fit into the Ohio State offense? Because if you look at the guys that they're bringing in, the Marvin Harrisons, the Emeka Ibukas, the Jaden Ballards, the Julian Flemings, these are all 6'1", 6'2", at least guys. And so it changes a little bit based on the offense. This isn't Urban Meyer's offense anymore. And so I think you're trying to figure out a way to bring in a player like Caden Saunders or like Caleb Brown or even like Mookie Cooper, who obviously couldn't find his niche in the offense in the year he was at Ohio State. Unless you have an answer to that, I don't know exactly if Caleb Brown or Caden Saunders type player fits. I think that someone like Caden Saunders could be like a KJ Hill type if he's able to get bigger, and get up to that 200, 205 pound mark. But right now he's like 170. And you just don't know how his speed changes. He's obviously very fast. He ran a 4.31 at the best of the Midwest in January. But there's discussion around it. But big picture, 3 guys, and the 2 that we've talked about the longest are C.J. Williams and Kojo Antwi.
And just to add to that, for just really quick, it's interesting to me because the KJ Hill receiver type was an Urban Meyer holdover and was, put into Ryan Day's offense after Urban Meyer left, and he did really well there. But at the same time, now you see a bigger body like Garrett Wilson. You see a bigger body like Jackson Smith and Jigba doing it really, really well in the slot. And you just wonder, does Ohio State need a slot receiver type body like 5'10", 5'11", when 6'1" and 6'2" can run in the slot and do the same things, but can also play on the outside? I mean, you look at Caleb Burton, the way they're recruiting, and Emeka Ibuka, the way they're recruiting for that slot receiver, it's really a position that can go outside, can come inside, can do motions, can block. Like it's not the typical, what we're used to 5'10", 5'11" slot receiver anymore. It's a big body who can also run in the slot. And so I just don't know if there's a place in the offense anymore for 5'10", 5'11" wide receivers. And that, it sucks for those guys, but that's just the way Ohio State's recruiting.
That's the way football's going. I mean, the whole goal is to find bigger guys who can run faster. Like that's the name of the game. It speaks to what we've talked about for the last 2 years, and that's positionless football. The Buckeyes are not recruiting necessarily an X receiver. They're recruiting a receiver. They're recruiting a guy who can do all the things they need to do. And when you're at a place like Ohio State right now, that you are the cream of the crop, you can get 6'2", 210-pound receivers who run a 4.3, and you don't need to find a 5'9", 170-pound receiver who can run a 4.3, because that doesn't always last very long in the Big Ten, because those guys hit pretty hard, because Ohio State has linebackers who are 6'4", 240 pounds and run a 4.5. So like you're constantly looking for bigger, faster, stronger guys. And I think if anything, even at a place like Alabama, where we saw Devontae Smith this last year, who's obviously not a big bodied wide receiver, he's still 6'1", still a kid that can really move around on the offense, and you got to have someone that can play both spots. So that's really the goal right now, and that's why C.J. Williams at 6'2", 195 pounds, Kojo Antwi at 6'1", 200 pounds are the guys that really make more sense at this point.
All right, Berm, I've got one more for you.
One more, let's do it.
Who is somebody that fans don't know about yet or aren't watching that they should be in Ohio or in the Midwest, maybe an under the radar recruit that you see a lot, and you've been to some camps now in the last couple of months? Who's somebody that's kind of caught your eye that you don't really hear a lot about yet?
Well, again, this is sort of one of those things, Spencer, because right now we are waiting and waiting and waiting to actually get to evaluate people and get people back on the trail. Like, we don't see a lot of these 2022 kids out yet. Even at the Under Armour camps and stuff, it's mostly the 23s and 24s and 25s you're looking at. I think the one guy that I find interesting, just based on the fact that Ohio State is clearly looking aggressively for defensive tackles after offering Hero Kanu and Chris McClellan, and there's another defensive tackle in the class of 2022 they just offered, whose name is escaping me. There is a clear need at this juncture for defensive tackles, and I think that's why Derek Shepard, who's a teammate of C.J. Hicks and committed to Cincinnati, is a player that I think we should probably just keep paying attention to. I've seen him a handful of times. He's up to, he's 6'3", he's 300 pounds. He's a really, really good looking athlete, and someone that I think in a normal world probably would have had a real opportunity to get a chance to hang out with and be recruited by and coached by Larry Johnson at multiple camps over the last few years. And had he been given that opportunity, I think that we'd have a better sense of exactly where he stands in the Ohio State mind. But I do know that the Buckeyes are interested in him, and he is going to be camping or working out for the Buckeyes at some point this summer. If you have new offers going out to Curtis Neal, to Chris McClellan, to Hero Kanu, there's clearly a thought that they need another defensive tackle in this class. Curtis Neal said that he was told that Ohio State wants 3 defensive tackles in this class. Right now, they don't have any. So one of them, if you talk about Caden Curry as a combo, a hybrid, strong side defensive end, defensive tackle, you maybe still need 3 other guys. So I think that the numbers are in a good position for Derek Shepard. And I think his work ethic and the fact that he's from Ohio, the fact that the Buckeyes are not going to be really able to be in the battle for the Walter Nolans or the Travis Shaws, who just don't seem like that's going to happen. There has to be other guys, and there's all these little moving parts, like Christian Miller in Georgia, who we've talked about. He's on probably Ohio State, USC, or Georgia, I think, are the top three there. If Georgia happens to lose Michael Williams to Alabama, which has been rumored, then all of a sudden maybe they go all in for Christian Miller. There's all these little things that can change, but I think the fact that Ohio State needs 3 defensive tackles or wants 3 defensive tackles in the class, the fact that Derek Shepard is right down the road, the fact that he has changed his body considerably in the last year plus, he certainly looks more like an Ohio State defensive tackle. And the fact that he has straight up said they want him to come camp and work out for them this summer. At least there's a thought in their mind that he could be that guy. So I'm going to go with Derek Shepard.
All right, that sounds pretty good. I saw him last year at the Fortress at Obetz when we went to the camp. I can't remember what camp it was.
The UC camp. Yeah.
Yeah, and he looked like a guy that you could see it, but it just wasn't there yet. You could see that it could happen for him. The light could come on for him. And, and now that he has changed his body a little bit in the last year, he's getting some attention. If Cincinnati's taking a guy, he's at least a high group of 5 level player, maybe a Big Ten level player at some schools. And if he continues to progress, if Larry Johnson likes what he sees out of him, that is a guy who is an in-state kid who could really use camps to bolster that composite ranking to really catch the attention of Ohio State and maybe catch an offer eventually. And, I would think if he is impressive in any of his camps that he goes to, or anytime Ohio State is able to see him, you just have to think that there's an offer maybe on the table.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, ironically, may work against him, that he's committed to Cincinnati, because Larry Johnson has such a respect for Luke Fickell and such a respect for Cincinnati as a program, that maybe there's an idea that the Buckeyes don't want to push and try to recruit a kid that's committed to UC. But I guess we'll have to see. That's going to have to be generally up to Derek Shepard as to what he wants to do down the road. If there's another player like in the class of 2022 that maybe we don't talk enough about, it might be Ephesians Prysock, a defensive back out in California, who I think has a very high and sincere interest in Ohio State. And he's a guy that I think, if Ryan Turner or Toriano Pride, if those two fall away by any chance, if Toriano Pride ends up at Clemson, or Ryan Turner surprises everyone and picks Boston College, for example, or there's an opportunity for someone like Ephesians, who has a pretty interesting name, to be really elevated up the Ohio State board at cornerback. So that's the other one I would think is worth maybe just monitoring as we head into the summer.
The best name on the board right now, in my opinion.
Ephesians Prysock is pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone else from this.
You know what else name is good? Spencer Holbrook. That's him. I'm me, Jeremy Birmingham. This has been Talking Stuff, the Ohio State Recruiting Podcast, brought to you by Buyers Auto. Thanks for watching. Please rate, review, subscribe. Head over to lettermenrow.com for all your Ohio State football coverage. We'll talk to you guys soon.